many homes that have done better, and it sounds like from what you said, the Fraser Valley, because you don't need convenience, you need...
Great afternoons on Juice FM are brought to you by Validus Custom Homes, where you get everything you asked for and more in a home. Visit Validus.
And the Kremlin, or does he just not like the idea of people protesting? Is it an ego thing more than anything?
90 minutes of non-stop relaxing favorites. It just helps you get into the right mood. 104.3 The Breeze.
Affected. In fact, prices were up like 30% in the 2 years after the foreign buyer tax came in. So COVID has behaved sort of like affluent buyers from overseas in that the demand pressure has been placed more on the single family and the higher end of the market than on the condo side.
Well, how can the market be made more affordable? I mean, especially in the short term, I guess.
Well, it has been by low interest rates, and that's probably part of the story. So if you say, what mortgage payment do you need to buy a house? I haven't done that calculation, but interest rates have fallen dramatically. I mean, they were already low, but, at one point we were in the 1.6% range. So over the course of the year, the interest rate's down about 1%. So, your interest payment falls pretty dramatically getting into the market. So part of the reason prices are up is, in fact, affordability has been helped a lot by low interest rates. So that's worth mentioning. Of course, the generic answer to the question of how do we make things more affordable is, in terms of affordability, we give up on single family and we allow more condo and rental building development.
I'm thinking particularly about young families. How does this affect our communities when younger people aren't able to afford homes and grow their families under these conditions?
Well, I guess the crisis is COVID, right? That's the proximate cause. Again, it hasn't been as bad for rental or for condo, but, of course, there's a lot of people suffering who haven't seen their incomes rise, and may have seen them fall as a result of COVID. And, those are the people you feel the worst about, certainly. So fixing COVID, obviously, is the priority for government. Generally speaking, again, for the long-run phenomenon of younger households priced out of the market, tax reform, I think we've done a lot on the demand side. We could continue to raise property tax, lower income and sales taxes, but I think the big action we're going to see on the policy arena is recognizing single family as a luxury and the importance of rezoning some areas to allow more multifamily development, so at least condos become affordable for purchase and for rent where needs be.
Tom, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Always nice to chat.
A pleasure. Thank you for your time.
That's Tom Davidoff, an economist at the UBC Sauder School of Business. What about you? Are you or someone in your family having a tough time getting into the housing market in Metro Vancouver right now, or the Fraser Valley, which is booming? We'd love to hear from you. Email onthecoast@cbc.ca. onthecoast@cbc.ca. It is a beautiful midweek afternoon out there, and Lisa's watching some things developing in the afternoon rush.
We still have delays, it looks like, for a fire in Vancouver, southbound Fraser at 30th, also in Mission, the crash on Lougheed Highway. It is closed between Manson and Dewdney Trunk Road, and you'll find a stall Highway 1 westbound in Langley just before the 208th Street overpass, partially in the right lane, and I'll have more traffic after the 4 o'clock news.
Thank you very much. Coming up in our next half hour, Canada has declared the Proud Boys a terrorist organization, so we'll hear how that move could ripple through Canadian politics. And Johanna Wagstaff will join us to take us through the forecast as we get close to the weekend. The world this hour is just ahead.
From CBC News, The World This Hour, I'm Tom Harrington. Ontario has unveiled its timeline to get kids back into the province's classrooms. For most regions, in-person learning will resume next Monday. Schools in Toronto, Peel and York regions will reopen their doors a little later on February 16th. Ontario's Education Minister Stephen Lecce says measures are being put in place to keep staff, students and their families safe.
Those include province-wide access to targeted voluntary asymptomatic testing for students and for staff. We've mandated masking for students from grade 1 and up, including outdoors where physical distancing cannot be maintained, and we've supported access to a higher quality 3-ply mask for our youngest kids.
Lecce says officials will monitor the reopening and, if necessary, reverse it. Ontario's regional public health units also still have the authority to close schools based on local circumstances. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney has announced new financial support for the province's continuing care facilities. Nearly $69 million added to the $260 million already invested in the sector.
This one-time funding will help cover the costs that operators have faced as they work to protect vulnerable Albertans. This includes additional cleaning, personal protective equipment and related supplies, and increased staffing levels. Every part of Alberta will benefit from this funding.
$10 million is going to Alberta's addiction and mental health facilities. Kenny says they need the added support because so many are struggling with the psychological toll of the pandemic and because of the rising rates of opioid-related deaths. The Trudeau government is adding 13 groups to its list of terrorist organizations, including the far-right Proud Boys. The announcement was made by Public Safety Minister Bill Blair.
There is a threshold beyond which it's no longer about speech, it's about violence, and it's about extremism, and it's about terror.
As Evan Dyer tells us, the government had been under political pressure after the storming of the U.S. Capitol building less than a month ago.
The listing of the Proud Boys comes just a week after all parties in the Commons backed an NDP motion calling for that very move. And today NDP leader Jagmeet Singh appeared to claim some credit for this decision. But public safety officials insisted that today's listing had nothing to do with politics or politicians and was a decision based only on intelligence gathered around the group over recent months. They also said the attack on the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, in which the Proud Boys played a role, was not a deciding factor in listing the group, although it did provide some additional evidence. The listing doesn't automatically mean that all Canadian Proud Boys are now criminals, but it does mean they will be in breach of the law if they give money or fundraise for the group or recruit new members. Evan Dyer, CBC News, Chelsea, Quebec.
Canada's Privacy Commissioner says an American company broke the law by collecting photos of Canadians without their knowledge or consent. An investigation found 48 law enforcement agencies and companies in Canada were using the facial recognition technology developed by Clearview AI. It allowed them to match online photos against their databases. Privacy Commissioner Daniel Perrier.
What Clearview does is mass surveillance, and it is illegal. It is an affront to individuals' privacy rights and inflicts broad-based harm on all members of society who find themselves continually in a police lineup.
Terrien admits there are limits to what he can do to impose punishment on a foreign company. Clearview has agreed to no longer make its facial recognition software available in Canada. The Golden Globes made history today with the nomination of 3 women for Best Director of the Year. They are Regina King from the U.S., China's Chloe Zhao, and the U.K.'s Emerald Fennell. It is the first time more than one woman has been nominated in a single year. Previously, only 5 women in total have received nominations for Best Director in the Globe's 77-year history. The Golden Globes will be handed out virtually on February 28th. Tina Fey and Amy Poehler will serve as co-hosts. And that is your World This Hour. For CBC News, I'm Tom Harrington. Thanks for listening.
thank you. Hi there, I'm Gloria Makarenko. You're listening to On the Coast. You heard Tom tell us just now the Proud Boys are now on Canada's terror watch list. That is a move not without its critics in British Columbia. We'll explore that coming up in a moment. And Being Mom. It's a program being offered to new mothers who may be experiencing depression or anxiety. We'll find out more about that just ahead. Zimmerman is with us now to bring us up to date on some of the stories the Vancouver newsroom is following today.
Gloria, charges have now been laid in connection with the home invasion in Vancouver Sunday that saw two men posing as police officers allegedly beat an elderly woman to death. 78-year-old Usha Singh died yesterday. One man has been charged with second-degree murder and the other with manslaughter. Police did not give details about a possible motive or say why Singh may have been targeted. And 16 more people in the province have died of COVID-19. BC also recorded 414 new positive tests in the last day. 278 people are in hospital with 80 in intensive care. More BC news coming up at the bottom of the hour.
Rob, thank you very much. And over to Lisa now. I know we've been asking people what brightened their day today because it was an incredibly gorgeous day. But before we get to that, Lisa, why don't you take us through traffic?
Sure. So we do have a new problem, a stall in Vancouver on Oak Street southbound before 70th. It's in the left lane. We've also been dealing with a stall, Highway 1 westbound, just before the 208 Street overpass, partially in the right lane, and a crash in Mission has Lougheed Highway closed between Manson and Dewdney Trunk Road. And we may still have a power failure in downtown Vancouver, north of Cooperage Way, south of Hastings, west of Main, east of Howe, and that's about 2,400 customers, and we'll have more traffic in a few minutes.
Yeah, but you know what brightened my day is I read the story that you brought to my attention about the geriatric bat. The geriatric bat in Texas at a bat sanctuary, 33 years old. His name is Statler, but it's the images and the story behind it that just warm your heart.
It is that the volunteers want Statler to remember what his days were like flying. So they whiz him around the sanctuary and his wings go, but he can't fly anymore. But they want him to feel the old days of when he used to be able to fly. And then they actually take him down to a little bucket of fruit so he can remember the days where he would scoop up food. And oh, he has one eye too, we forgot to mention.
He's one eye, arthritis. It's the oldest bat in captivity right now in the world. 33 years old. But it's just the image of, I mean, it's amazing that a bat can almost look cuddly, but, you know, sort of wrapped around his owner's arm, or the caretaker's arm, I guess. Anyway, that was just so moving.
It's a large bat, too. It's a particular bat. It's a very large bat, wouldn't you say?
It's a very large bat. It's a very, yeah. I just never thought I would get kind of, you know, teary-eyed over a bat, but thank you. Thank you for that.
You're so welcome.
Okay. Yes, a geriatric bat story brightened my day. What brightened your day today? On the Coast at cbc.ca. Well, checking in with Johanna Wagstaff always brightens our day. Hello there.
Hi, Gloria.
What a gorgeous day. I'm looking up at some clouds, and I know you're the cloud maven. They almost look like, they're not fish scales, almost a fish, almost a fish skeleton or something. They're all, what do you call those clouds?
Yes, those are cirrus, and I think they've got a particular add-on name. Cirrus fibratus are the ones that look like the fish scales. They're beautiful. Cirrus fibratus.
I knew you'd know. I know. I never worry about putting you on the spot with questions like that, because you're always going to come. What brightened your day today, Johanna?
I love hearing these stories. So I had to go right downtown. I'm not in the studio right now, but I had to go downtown today. Walking over Cambie Street Bridge. I know you do that sometimes. It was just the perfect day to have to go downtown. And I got a coffee. You know, obviously I was wearing a mask, keeping my distance, but it kind of felt like the old days. You know, I got an oatmeal to go from somewhere.
No toddler and dog in tow this time?
I had a very me morning.
Yes, well, that's important.
Yeah.
You time is very important.
Thank you.
I'm glad. Sometimes it's the simple things. Just a nice view and a little bit of me time is always a good thing. What kind of forecast with those clouds clouds. I'm sure they're pretty to watch right now because there's a blue sky as the backdrop, but that's going to change, isn't it?
It is, yes. The high cirrus, the first in the cloud series to herald a change, and that is coming as the system slides down the coast. I don't think the rain will get to us until overnight, so we at least have a dry evening, but increasing cloudiness as we head on. 3 as our morning low temperature, back up to a 6 tomorrow, but showers through most of the day, and I think we're going to have to keep the showers lingering through Friday as well. Not as many showers as Thursday. We could actually see them heavy at times tomorrow, really tapering off. I'm going to have to keep them in the forecast for Friday and maybe Saturday morning, but I still see some good sunshine as we head into Sunday. A mix of sun and cloud, not a blue sky day like we've had today, but hopefully some sun for Sunday, and still looking at a bit of a cool down for early next week.
Okay, we'll watch for that. And an interesting science story today about the global effect of typhoons in Korea.
Yes, this is such an example of the chaos theory. You know, a butterfly flaps its wings on one side of the world and creates big winds on the other. But in this case, the butterflies were 3 typhoons in 2 weeks in the Korean peninsula in late August, early September. These massive low-pressure systems actually created a wave train in the jet stream that moved all the way across the Pacific and sent big winds to Washington and Oregon just as wildfires were starting. Now, we know climate change had sort of been part of the factor that prepped conditions for a historic season, but these winds from the typhoons helped fan those fires. So a reminder of how connected everything is.
Johanna, thank you very much, and I'm glad you had some me time today.
Thank you.
Johanna Wagstaff is our meteorologist here at CBC Vancouver. 11 minutes past 4 o'clock right now. The news that Canada added 13 new organizations to its terrorist watch list is something we have been following today. So these groups are predominantly neo-Nazi groups or groups associated with Al-Qaeda or ISIS. And the most recognizable name on that list is the Proud Boys, following the storming of the U.S. Capitol last month. So here to explain the legal and also the political implications of this move is Garth Davies, a senior research affiliate at the Canadian Network for Research on Terrorism, Security and Society. That's a long name, but Garth is also an associate professor of criminology at Simon Fraser University. Good afternoon to you.
Hi, Gloria.
Wow, what a day. So when you look at the events of the last couple of years, what do you think has brought Ottawa to this point with the Proud Boys?
I think we've just seen a consistent pattern of engagement and escalation amongst the Proud Boys, both in terms of their activities and in terms of their rhetoric. So I suspect that's been a large part of how we ended up here today.
Okay, well, this is not purely an ideological designation. I mean, being labeled a terrorist group carries financial and legal consequences to it. What are those?
It does. As far as the group, Proud Boys as a group, it opens them up to have their property seized, have assets seized, and other penalties regarding what they're allowed to do with their finances. On an individual level, it means that people cannot support Proud Boys in any kind of way that furthers their ideological cause, lest they open themselves up to legal penalties. So you're right, there's more here than just a designation. It has actual consequences.
Well, and what consequences for the organization as a whole? What about for the individuals who are found to be associated with the Proud Boys?
Well, again, it limits what they can do in terms of how they can support the Proud Boys. It still isn't illegal to, for example, be a member of the group, but it is illegal to support them in any kind of way that furthers their cause. So, for example, fundraising activities or showing up at protests and anything that furthers their cause opens those individuals up to legal penalties.
So when it comes to the actual process of designating a group a terrorist organization, what kinds of things does the Canadian government take into account when they make this kind of a decision?
That is a very good question because it's not exactly clear what goes into the designation. It's the actual process of listing is a bit opaque. But really, from what they've done over the past couple of years, it really seems that groups that differentiate themselves from other groups, particularly with regards to their level of violence or what they're willing to do. So we see, Proud Boys started in 2016, and people knew about it very quickly, but they weren't. They were actually seen as sort of more of an oddity, and I think some of the, if you read some of their ideological stances, it's quite strange. But they just become increasingly, particularly in the U.S., but in Canada as well, they become increasingly focused on the violent aspects of their ideology, being very provocative at any kind of rallies or protests that they show up at. So, and really that designation, that differentiation where violence becomes central to the group seems to be very important as part of the designating process.
Okay, from what you're saying, it sounds like the process is a little bit opaque. It's not as if you tick the boxes there. What would it take for it to become more transparent?
It would be challenging because, we have to emphasize the fact that for law enforcement, when you're conducting these sorts of investigations, you don't want groups to be aware that they're being investigated at this level. So I think that the best we can hope for, or a good practice, is simply the justifications that happen after the fact. And I think, when this happens, when the designation happens, the government puts it in the government gazette, and we're able to read and see who has been attached to it. In this case, I think that the justifications were quite sound. Again, I don't think anybody questions that the Proud Boys and Adam Waffen and the base and those sorts of groups represent genuine threats.
Well, when the federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh called for the Proud Boys to be added to the list, Harsha Walia of the BC Civil Liberties Union Association wrote an article in response, and she writes that since 9/11, anti-terrorism laws and designations have disproportionately impacted people of color. She says the global war on terror and its ongoing aftermath must be dismantled, not bolstered. Let me be clear that calling for the inclusion of white supremacist organizations in the fold of our anti-terrorism legal infrastructure will not work. What are your thoughts on dismantling rather than broadening the legal category of terrorism?
I appreciate where that position is coming from, and the position is sound. We have at times used the legal system in ways that have been disproportionately affecting groups that it should not. Having said that, I don't see the utility or the appropriateness of dismantling the structure. The bottom line is we have genuine threats, and I think in the post 9/11 world, a lot of countries, Canada included, were playing catch up. The threat to them kind of came upon them very quickly and there wasn't a lot of good information as to how to proceed. And so mistakes were made, and I think that governments would admit that mistakes were made. But that isn't to say that we toss the baby out with the bathwater and we no longer have a system for dealing with what are genuine ideological violent threats. The Proud Boys, these groups, we saw this on January 6th. As they said in the listing briefs, this was in the works for months. So it wasn't the actual event that happened in January 6th that precipitated this. It was already happening. This group has been on the radar for a while, and they do things that are concerning. So I can't support any kind of notion of dismantling our system.
Well, the Conservative Party recently ejected MP Derek Sloan from the caucus for taking donations from Paul Fromm. Paul Fromm, known to have ties with white supremacist groups. Does the move to condemn the Proud Boys, do you think speaks to a greater reckoning within right-wing politics in this country?
If it doesn't, it should. I think that for too long, there has been this game of sort of skirting the line, and right-wing. To be very clear, the Proud Boys do not represent mainstream right-wing conservative politics. They're very much at the extreme end of it. I mean, that's why we characterize them as being a violent extremist group, and they're not just a right group; they're an extremist group. But that relationship between political groups and actors and extremist groups has been, frankly, it's been exploited by political groups, where they're able to sort of just walk up to that line enough, and in some cases just barely step over it, gaining the support of grassroots organizations and of the people who follow these groups, which is not an insubstantial amount of people, while sort of sheltering politicians by being able to say, well, we're not, I'm not a member of that particular group or that particular organization. So I think it does need to be recognized. It took a long time for Canada and the U.S. to get over the knee-jerk reaction to anything that is of the right can have extremism. You can have extremism on the left, clearly that we see the Trump, the former Trump administration trying to sell everything in that view. The right has to understand that applies to them as well.
Garth, it's really good to hear your thoughts on this news out of Ottawa today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Blair.
Garth Davies is a senior research affiliate at the Canadian Network for Research on Terrorism, Security and Society. He is also an associate professor of criminology at Simon Fraser University.